talk about what I've placed here. These were on the right, the studies that I did last week, 1, 2, 3, and I did this morning. I'll just go in a bit closer. This took an hour. This one here of the buds of the narcissi before they actually open. They're taking an awful long time to open. They've been like in this state for ages. But it was quite nice to just sort of really examine that little area closely and make sure that the stems stand out more than the leaves, and get the shape of this bud in front of that one. Things like that take a little time, and it's worth really looking at closely and not just fudging it. The other thing I was going to say was, when with the shape where you see it face on, it's it appears that it's going to be dead simple, but first of all, you've got to remember that this is based on a circle, and that each of these petals actually overlap one another. So in the drawing, it's worth putting in where they overlap. Okay, and I've done that with this drawing underneath. I think you can just see it. Can you? Yeah. So I've actually drawn it so that you can see it. This one's side on, this one's face on. Now, before we get painting, I would like, first of all, when you're ready and you've actually done as much drawing as you want to of your subject, I'd like you to put your hand up so I can see. I will show you my drawing that I've done, which is this here. It's not very much, but it's enough to plan out the subject on the paper, so I know where things are going to go. I'll take the board. This is my subject sideways on, so that I can go in closer. So I've got a pot of pansies in the foreground here. Now, I'm not suggesting you do as complicated a subject as I've set up. I've done this because I'll carry on working on it after the session, and I just wanted to have a combination of shapes, heights, and colours in this painting. Next to it is this little pot of miniature daffodils, which you can see on the left-hand side on my screen. And then behind it are the 2 pots of narcissi, which are much taller than the things in the foreground. Okay, now this is as much drawing in pencil as I'm going to do. I haven't gone into things in great detail. This one perhaps I have for your sake, just so you can see, how I've drawn, made the petals overlap. I've drawn the central trumpet in the middle here, and I've put a bit of a stem and some leaves in. But I ideally would rather not have pencil line on my work, but I think for when something's a little bit more complex and a bit more challenging, then I would allow you to, or myself, to use a pencil. Okay? Right, so if you all get your subject drawn up on whatever size paper you've elected to choose, either A4 or A3, mine's a bit less than A3, but anyway, that's the size I'm doing. Okay, all right. My palette with the usual colours in it, I've been using it this morning. So ultramarine, Prussian blue, alizarin crimson. I always keep a bit of raw sienna now on my palette because it's such a nice, useful colour. Vermilion, gamboge, aureolin, and at the end, this is this lovely pink, which you don't need to worry about. Just ignore that unless you are doing something that is like a cyclamen. Like Shelley was painting a cyclamen the other day, and it required a certain pink, but I don't think anybody's doing that today, so you don't need to worry. Now, with the green, I would probably start, obviously they vary a bit, and obviously you've got to modify them a bit, but I probably would start with aureolin. I'm going to just do it over here. This is my aureolin. Okay. And I've dampened all my colours before the start of the session with water, so they're already nice and moist. And it releases the pigment into the little bit of water that I put onto them, so I can make a reasonably strong mixture of the colour. And then I'm cleaning my brush off and do it very thoroughly before you go into anything else. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the Prussian blue. Won't need very much because it's powerful, this stuff. And I mix it with the yellow, and it makes sort of, you know, a kind of limey green. If I put a bit more in, it just makes it slightly less limey, a bit more greeny. I have this morning put a tiny touch of this raw sienna in because it kind of takes that acidity off the blue, and you get something that is more in line with the greens that you see in nature. Okay.
What was that one?
Raw sienna or yellow ochre. Okay, so that would be sort of a lightish green. Now for a darkish green, I'm going to make a darkish green as well. I go back into the aureolin and start again, another new pile of wash. Add water to it, so there's a fair amount of it. This time, to make the colour darker, I'm going to use a little bit more of this Prussian blue. I need a bit more. Just remember, every time you go back into your Prussian blue, wash your brush, dry it, so you're not adding more water to your mixture. You're keeping it strong. Now it's beginning to go into a sort of darker green. Now I think that's not, it's not sort of, it's still a little bit acidic, you know, because these are sort of, well, I don't know, they're not sort of colours that you'd find in nature. So you have to adjust it slightly, and the trick is to do it so it's not too obvious and it doesn't make the colour look dull. So again, I'm going to put a little bit more of this raw sienna in, and that already I can see, you'll probably will find it quite hard, but already it's made that green less harsh. Okay, so those are my first two greens that I would mix for the leaves, and I may have to modify them when I do wet into wet, either by adding some water or even dropping in a bit of some other colour like red in the dark areas to make it sort of the green darker. Remember, use the complementary colour to darken things or in the sort of shadow area. Now I'm taking the back of my paper, and I want you to all do this. Some of you may be better at it than others and more familiar with doing this than others. But first of all, I'm going to take my number 9 brush and I'm going to put it into the light green mix, okay? And then what I want you to do is to actually go up on the tip of your brush as if you were doing I mean, I'm taking the daffodil leaves because they're in front of me. So I start with the tip of my brush, and then I allow my brush to flatten, and then I turn it over because there's still plenty of colour in this brush, and then go back up on its tip again. Okay, now I'm going to just put the tip of my brush into that darker green and let it, while it's still damp, sort of fuse it into the green, into the light green. Can you see that? Yes?
Yep.
Okay, and then if I want to make it a bit darker still, I could add some, get some darker green from the palette, and just drop a bit in on the tip. These leaves, and you have to do this carefully because while it's still wet, you know, you'll drag the colour if you're not careful. I would just practice a bit, but I'm going to do this with the dark green. I'm going to start from you can start either from the top going down or the bottom going up, it doesn't matter. On the tip, flatten down the brush, turn, or you can leave that one and then go on to another one. Flatten the brush. So you have the sense of using the whole head of your brush at times. Okay? Not just a part of it. And what I tend to see a lot of is people, they've got a shape, like it might be a leaf. Avoid putting an outline around like that because you'll never get rid of it. Start with the flat of the brush or the tip of the brush and pull the colour down into the shape. But use the whole head. Obviously, if it's a tiny little leaf, then you know it'll be a different technique. If it's a primula leaf, you might sort of start like this and then quickly bring the colour down. You might even then say, well, I want to soften that colour a bit and put some of my lighter colour and a bit of water and swiftly draw in the rest of the leaf, like so. Okay, so can we do a little bit of practice with some greens on the back of a piece of spare paper before you get started? So, and be aware of how much of your brush you're actually using, because I suspect in many cases you're just using maybe the tip and half of the hairs of the brush. And it, you know, the painting has a more natural feel to it where the whole brush head has been used and there's a sense of freedom in the brush strokes. Okay, so even if you're not going to use big sort of flat shapes like mine, have a go, just see what it feels like. And as you can see, these greens are all still very light, and if I wanted to make them darker, I might have to go over some of them again with a stronger mix, or I might have to make a stronger mix of green. So I'm going to try making a little bit stronger one over here. And for this strong, very strong, dark green, I've just used Prussian blue and a little bit of the raw sienna, nothing else, and it seems to work well. And remember that the colours, I'm looking at these now, these greens, they're drying really light, and yet in the palette they look quite dark. So remember, your colours always dry considerably darker than, considerably lighter than you think.